The National Football League is built on discipline, talent, and million-dollar opportunities. Every Sunday, fans watch athletes perform at the highest level of the sport, believing they have it all: fame, fortune, endorsements, and careers most people can only dream about. But behind the packed stadiums and television contracts lies another reality. For some players, one bad decision led to flashing police lights, criminal investigations, courtroom appearances, and headlines that overshadowed years of athletic achievement. In several high-profile cases, NFL players found themselves arrested or charged in connection with drug possession or drug-related offenses, raising difficult questions about personal responsibility, pressure, addiction, and life outside football. Today, we're examining some of the most notable examples. And while every story is different, they all share one common thread: extraordinary careers placed in jeopardy by choices made away from the field. The first person we will be looking at is Le'Veon Bell. When Le'Veon Bell entered the league, many believed he was destined to become one of the NFL's elite running backs. His combination of patience, vision, and explosiveness made him nearly impossible to defend. Defenders often looked frozen as Bell waited behind the line before suddenly bursting through a gap. But in August of 2014, during the preseason, Bell's name appeared in the news for reasons unrelated to football. A motorcycle officer in a Pittsburgh suburb stopped a vehicle Bell was driving, with teammate LeGarrette Blount in the passenger seat, on their way to the airport for a flight to a preseason game in Philadelphia. The officer reported smelling marijuana coming from the car. Both players admitted to having bought and smoked some of it. The stop turned into a full arrest. Bell was charged with both misdemeanor marijuana possession and driving under the influence, while Blount, who hadn't been driving, was charged with possession alone. The timing couldn't have been worse. The Steelers were preparing for another season, and one of their brightest young stars was instead dealing with legal problems and league scrutiny, along with a now infamous remark, with Bell reportedly telling officers he hadn't realized you could get a DUI for being high. It wasn't the legal defense his attorneys were hoping for. Bell ultimately accepted responsibility through the legal process. In February 2015, he was sentenced to 15 months of probation in a first-time offender program, along with a 60-day license suspension, a mandatory substance evaluation, and a court-ordered safety class for drunk driving. The NFL added its own penalty on top of the court's: a 3-game suspension to start the 2015 season, steeper than Blount's 1-game ban specifically because of the added DUI charge. Bell returned to football and continued building an outstanding NFL career. In the years that followed, he earned multiple Pro Bowl selections and became one of the league's most productive offensive weapons, later reflecting publicly that the arrest taught him exactly what he was willing to risk for the game. "I love the game of football," he said. "I don't want anything, whatever it is, performance-enhancing drugs, marijuana, alcohol, women, that could get me in trouble and make me miss football." His case demonstrated something that would repeat throughout this list in different forms. A legal setback does not necessarily end a career, but it permanently becomes part of a player's public legacy. Next, Santonio Holmes. Few moments define an NFL career like catching the game-winning touchdown in the Super Bowl. Santonio Holmes accomplished exactly that in Super Bowl 43, hauling in a 6-yard touchdown pass from Ben Roethlisberger with 35 seconds left to win the Steelers their NFL record 6th championship. He was named the game's most valuable player. It remains one of the greatest receptions in championship history, cementing Holmes' place in football lore. Yet even before that moment, controversy had already started following him. In October 2008, Pittsburgh police pulled Holmes over near the city's arena. The vehicle matched one officers were looking for in connection with a drug sting. Officers said they found 3 marijuana-filled cigars, or blunts, in the car, and that Holmes himself pointed out where they were stashed before he was searched. He wasn't taken into custody. Police determined he didn't appear impaired and issued him a summons by mail, but he was formally charged with misdemeanor marijuana possession. Steelers coach Mike Tomlin benched him for the following game, a loss to the New York Giants. The case dragged through the courts for months before prosecutors ultimately dropped the charge entirely, conceding that the traffic stop itself likely wouldn't hold up to a legal challenge. By then, though, the damage to Holmes's reputation was already part of the story. It was notably not his first brush with law enforcement. Holmes had also been arrested on a domestic violence charge in 2006, later dropped after the alleged victim declined to pursue it, and on a disorderly conduct charge in Miami the same year. What made the marijuana case land differently was timing. Just months later, standing at the podium during Super Bowl week with the entire football world watching, Holmes made a startling admission of his own, revealing that as a teenager in Belle Glade, Florida, he had spent roughly a year selling drugs on a street corner before football gave him a way out. He said he hoped sharing it might steer at-risk kids who saw themselves in his story toward the field instead of the streets. For NFL organizations, stories like Holmes's illustrate a tension that never fully goes away. Teams invest millions in star talent, and every legal issue, proven or not, creates uncertainty. Teams worry about suspensions. Sponsors worry about reputation. Fans wonder whether distractions will affect performance. Holmes continued playing at a high level for years afterward, including stints with the New York Jets and Chicago Bears. But his football accomplishments increasingly shared headlines with off-field discussions that many believed could have been avoided. Next, Sam Hurd. Hurd was an undrafted free agent out of Northern Illinois who carved out a respectable 5-year NFL career, mostly as a special teams contributor and depth receiver for the Dallas Cowboys before signing a 3-year, roughly $5 million contract with the Chicago Bears in 2011. By outward appearances, he was a hardworking pro and a married father. According to federal investigators, he was also building a second identity as a major drug distributor. On December 14, 2011, Hurd met an undercover federal agent posing as a trafficker at a steakhouse outside Chicago. According to the criminal complaint, Hurd told the agent he wanted to buy 5 to 10 kilograms of cocaine and 1,000 pounds of marijuana per week to distribute around the Chicago area, claiming he was already moving 4 kilograms a week. He left that meeting with a gift bag containing a 1 kilogram sample of cocaine. Federal agents arrested him in the parking lot. The Bears cut him immediately. Hurd was released on bail, but according to court documents, he continued trying to acquire drugs through a cousin while awaiting trial, and failed 2 separate drug tests for marijuana. By August 2012, a judge revoked his bail and ordered him back into custody. In April 2013, Hurd pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to possess with intent to distribute cocaine and marijuana, a charge carrying a mandatory minimum of 10 years and a maximum of life in prison. At his sentencing hearing in November 2013, Hurd delivered a rambling, emotional 30-minute plea for mercy in front of more than a dozen family members and friends. He insisted he was never a major kingpin, that he had a serious marijuana addiction, and that he had never personally used or sold cocaine, even as prosecutors laid out a pattern of agreements to buy and sell large quantities of both. The federal sentencing guidelines called for 27 to 34 years. The judge, Jorge Solis, gave him 15. "You had everything going for you," Solis told him. "I think this case is a tragedy." In a later interview with Sports Illustrated, Hurd made an additional claim that rippled through NFL locker rooms, that he had shared marijuana with teammates and had smoked, in his words, all day, every day during the final years of his career. Prosecutors were quick to push back on the idea that his case was about football at all. "He's not being prosecuted because he's an NFL player," one federal attorney said at the time. "He's being prosecuted because he's a drug dealer." Hurd was released from federal prison to community confinement in January 2023 after serving roughly a decade behind bars for a $5 million contract that turned into a 15-year sentence. Next, Greg Robinson. Greg Robinson entered the NFL with enormous expectations. Selected 2nd overall in the 2014 draft out of Alabama, Robinson possessed the physical tools teams covet in offensive linemen: elite size, athleticism, and strength. He went on to earn more than $29 million across stints with the Los Angeles Rams, Detroit Lions, and Cleveland Browns, even if a Pro Bowl selection never quite materialized to match the draft pedigree. Then, in February 2020, Robinson's name made national headlines for an entirely different reason. He and former Auburn teammate Quan Bray were driving a rented SUV from Los Angeles to Louisiana when they passed through the Sierra Blanca Border Patrol checkpoint roughly 80 miles southeast of El Paso, Texas. A drug-sniffing canine alerted agents to the vehicle. Inside, in large duffel bags packed into the cargo area, agents found approximately 157 pounds of marijuana, along with packaging equipment and over $3,000 in cash. According to the federal complaint, Robinson had even tried to convince the Uber driver who'd been hired to chauffeur them to claim ownership of the drugs, an offer the driver refused. Both men were charged with conspiracy to possess with intent to distribute marijuana and held without bond. They faced up to 20 years in federal prison. Robinson ultimately resolved the case with 5 years of probation and a $5,000 fine. A significant break compared to the maximum exposure, but it effectively ended any realistic path back to an NFL roster. It should have been the end of the story. It wasn't. In February 2022, almost exactly 2 years later, police in Thibodaux, Louisiana pulled over Robinson's Cadillac Escalade for a traffic violation. AK 9 unit alerted officers to the vehicle. This time, according to police, what they found wasn't just marijuana. Cocaine, crack cocaine, methamphetamine, oxycodone, hydrocodone, and Xanax, all allegedly possessed with intent to distribute. The discovery led police to obtain search warrants for multiple additional properties connected to Robinson. He was booked into the Lafourche Parish Jail on 8 felony drug charges, held on $315,000 bond, all while he was still technically serving probation from the border arrest. The allegations shocked many football fans. How could a player who had earned millions and reached the highest level of the sport become connected to such a serious legal situation? Twice, with each case more severe than the last. The case illustrated an uncomfortable truth about professional sports. Success on the field does not guarantee wise decision-making away from it. For Robinson, football discussions had become entirely secondary to legal analysis. Next, Travis Henry. Travis Henry's rise was a genuine American underdog story. Raised in poverty in Frostproof, Florida, by a mother who picked oranges for a living, Henry became a record-setting running back at the University of Tennessee before the Buffalo Bills drafted him in the second round in 2001. He earned a Pro Bowl selection in 2002, rushing for over 1,400 yards, and went on to record 3 separate 1,000-yard rushing seasons across stops with Buffalo, Tennessee, and finally Denver. But off the field, Henry's life was spiraling under a different kind of weight. By his own accounts, he had fathered at least 9, by some reports 11, children with multiple women, and the child support obligations alone were reported to exceed $170,000 a year. Despite having earned more than $11 million over his career, he said publicly that he was effectively broke. In June of 2008, the Denver Broncos released Henry. Just months later, in October 2008, federal drug agents arrested him as he left a Denver area apartment carrying 6 kilograms of cocaine. He briefly tried to run before being caught. Investigators determined Henry had been financing a drug operation that moved cocaine between Colorado and Montana, working with an associate to transport multiple kilogram quantities. Henry pleaded guilty in April 2009 to a single count of conspiracy to traffic cocaine. He faced a possible sentence of 10 years to life. In July 2009, a federal judge in Billings, Montana sentenced him to 3 years in prison plus 5 years of probation. A sentence later reduced to 2 years after Henry completed an in-prison drug treatment program. The judge, weighing both the seriousness of the conspiracy and Henry's diminished circumstances, described him as essentially a financier rather than a kingpin, ensnared in the operation by a friend after losing $40,000 in stolen drug proceeds. Standing in a blue prison jumpsuit, in handcuffs, Henry told the court that his actions did not reflect who he truly was. If given the chance, he said, "I want to tell kids around the world that using drugs and abusing drugs isn't the way." The NFL suspended him indefinitely following the conviction. He served his sentence, was released in 2011, and was technically reinstated by the league the following year. But at 33 years old, for years removed from football, no team called. And then, In February of 2026 came the postscript nobody saw coming. Henry was one of 5 former NFL players granted a presidential pardon for federal drug crimes. The pardon forgives the federal conviction. It does not undo the 3 years he spent in prison, or the career that ended 4 years before his 34th birthday, or the fall from Pro Bowl running back to federal inmate that took, as one report at the time put it, just 13 months from start to finish. Next, Barry Cofield. Barry Cofield spent 10 seasons establishing himself as a respected defensive lineman in the NFL, including a Super Bowl 42 championship with the New York Giants, where he recorded a quarterback hit on Tom Brady in the Giants' stunning upset of the previously undefeated New England Patriots. After retiring following the 2015 season, many expected his football career, Super Bowl ring included, to define his legacy. Instead, in July 2018, nearly 3 years after his last NFL snap, Cofield made headlines for one of the more dramatic arrests on this entire list. At around 2:30 in the morning, deputies in Seminole County, Florida found Cofield's Cadillac Escalade stopped at an intersection. Engine running, foot apparently still on the brake as the traffic lights cycled from red to green multiple times with the car never moving. When officers approached and woke him, Cofield allegedly accelerated through the intersection and led police on a chase, swerving through lanes before a second patrol car blocked his path. Rather than stop, he rammed it. Deputies broke his window, pulled him from the vehicle at gunpoint, and handcuffed him. In his pocket, they found 2 small bags of a reddish powdery substance that later tested positive for heroin. Cofield was initially booked on 5 charges: heroin possession, fleeing and eluding a law enforcement officer, aggravated assault on a police officer, resisting arrest, and DUI. In a plea deal, the more serious charges were resolved down to no contest pleas on heroin possession and DUI causing damage, resulting in 12 months of probation, a 6-month license suspension, and 50 hours of community service, with a heroin charge eligible to be dropped entirely if Cofield completed a drug court program. The news surprised observers precisely because Cofield was no longer an active player under the constant spotlight of weekly NFL competition. He'd been out of football for years, with nothing left to prove and, on paper, nothing left to lose. His situation served as a reminder that life after football presents its own challenges. Athletes often lose the structure that dominated their daily routines for over a decade, and adjusting to a completely different lifestyle is not always easy. While every individual's circumstances differ, post-retirement struggles like this have become an increasingly discussed topic across professional sports. Proof that the risk of a headline like this doesn't necessarily disappear the moment a player turns in his playbook. Next, Onterrio Smith. Not every chapter in this story is a tragedy. Some of them are simply bizarre, and Onterrio Smith's belongs in a category of its own. Smith was a Minnesota Vikings running back with real talent and a real problem. By 2005, he'd already been suspended for violating the NFL's substance abuse policy on multiple occasions. On April 21st of that year, airport security at Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport searched his bag after, according to reports, a tube of toothpaste raised a flag. What they found instead made national news: several vials of dried, powdery substance, and an elaborate device called the Original Whizzinator, a prosthetic kit complete with a fake bladder designed specifically to help users pass a urine drug test. Smith told the officer it was dried urine, intended, he claimed, for use with the device for making a clean urine test. He told police he was simply transporting it to a cousin. To be clear about what this incident actually was, Smith was detained and questioned, not criminally arrested, and he was never personally charged with a crime over the device itself. Though the makers of the Whizzinator were later federally charged with conspiracy to defraud the government, since their product was reportedly being marketed to help truckers, pilots, and other federally regulated workers cheat mandatory drug screenings. For Smith, the consequence came directly from the league. 2 months later, the NFL suspended him for the entire 2005 season, his 3rd violation of the substance abuse policy. The Vikings cut him before the next season started. A brief Canadian Football League tryout went nowhere, and his NFL career was effectively over at 24 years old. It remains one of the strangest cautionary tales in league history. Proof that sometimes the thing that ends a career isn't the drug use itself, but getting caught red-handed trying to hide it in the most elaborate, most public, most quotable way imaginable. Next, Justin Blackmon. Some players on this list squander Hall of Fame talent. Few squandered it as completely or as publicly as Justin Blackmon. Coming out of Oklahoma State, Blackmon was a two-time unanimous All-American and two-time winner of the Biletnikoff Award as the nation's top receiver, an honor only one other player in college football history had ever won twice. The Jacksonville Jaguars selected him 5th overall in the 2012 draft, and as a rookie, he caught 64 passes for 865 yards. The talent was never the question. The warning signs started even before he was drafted, with a DUI arrest at Oklahoma State that was later reduced to a lesser charge. They escalated quickly in the pros. In June 2012, weeks after being drafted, Blackmon was arrested for DUI in Stillwater, Oklahoma. In April 2013, the NFL suspended him 4 games for violating its substance abuse policy. He came back for 4 games, and then, in November 2013, the league suspended him indefinitely for a 3rd policy violation. He never played another NFL snap. What followed was a slow-motion unraveling. In July 2014, Blackmon was arrested in Edmond, Oklahoma, and charged with marijuana possession after a traffic stop. That October, the Jaguars revealed he had voluntarily entered a 90-day treatment program. In May 2015, the NFL formally denied his application for reinstatement. And in December 2015, his 4th arrest connected to substance issues. Blackmon was pulled over again, this time on a non-working brake light, and charged with DUI after officers smelled alcohol and he admitted to having had drinks at a bar. The Jaguars never officially cut him. His unique contract structure meant the team had little financial incentive to do so, and he simply remained in roster limbo, suspended and signed and unseen. By 2016, when he pleaded guilty to the DUI charge and received a suspended sentence with probation, his football career had already been over for years in everything but name. He was later inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame in 2024, a Hall of Fame distinction for a player whose NFL career produced fewer than 100 catches and ended before his 24th birthday. Blackmon's story doesn't have the federal prison sentence of a Sam Hurd or Travis Henry. It has something arguably sadder, a generational talent who simply disappeared, one suspension and one arrest at a time, while the league and his own team kept the door open long after it was clear he wasn't walking back through it. Next, Todd Marinovich. Perhaps no player better symbolizes wasted potential than Todd Marinovich. Long before he ever set foot in the NFL, Marinovich was treated almost like a scientific experiment. His upbringing focused intensely on athletic perfection. Diet, training, competition, performance, all engineered from early childhood by his father, a former NFL lineman determined to build the perfect quarterback. The media nicknamed him Robo QB. He led USC to a Rose Bowl victory in 1990 and was the Los Angeles Raiders' first-round pick in 1991. But immense pressure often carries hidden consequences. The Raiders sent a 21-year-old Marinovich to the Betty Ford Clinic during his rookie year. He later admitted he wasn't remotely ready to take it seriously. His NFL career lasted only 2 seasons before substance abuse problems drove him out of the league entirely, and what followed was one of the most well-documented struggles in football history. A felony guilty plea in 1997 for cultivating marijuana that brought 3 months in jail, a heroin possession arrest in 2001, another drug possession charge in 2005, and a 2007 guilty plea to felony methamphetamine possession, along with misdemeanor syringe possession and resisting arrest. The arrest that crystallized his story for an entire generation of fans came in August 2016, when Marinovich was 47 years old. Irvin, California police receive a call about a naked man wandering a hiking trail near a residential neighborhood. Officers eventually found him hiding, still naked, in a stranger's backyard, holding a brown paper bag. Inside were marijuana and a substance that field tests indicated was methamphetamine. He was cooperative with officers and was booked on charges of trespassing, possession of a controlled substance, possession of drug paraphernalia, and marijuana possession. It is a tragic story, the police commander on scene told reporters afterward. We found him hiding in a backyard. Someone else's backyard. Marinovich's story differs from many others on this list because it reflects not just one isolated mistake, but more than 2 decades of personal battles, stretching from his first rehab stint as a 21-year-old rookie to a backyard in Irvine more than 25 years later. For countless fans, Marinovich became less a cautionary tale about football itself and more one about the dangers of unrealistic expectations placed on a child before he ever had a choice in the matter, and the unresolved personal issues that followed him for the rest of his life. Next, Greg Hardy. Greg Hardy possessed undeniable ability as a pass rusher. Quarterbacks feared facing him. Offensive coordinators had to account for him every single week. And in 2013, his production with the Carolina Panthers earned him a Pro Bowl selection. Yet, controversy repeatedly overshadowed his athletic accomplishments, and one arrest in particular added a new layer to an already complicated public image. In September 2016, months after his lone, turbulent season with the Dallas Cowboys had ended, and while he remained unsigned by any team, Hardy was pulled over in the Dallas suburb of Richardson, Texas, for failing to signal a turn. A search of his vehicle turned up a small bag containing what police said tested positive for cocaine, 0.7 grams, found in his wallet, along with an item containing marijuana remnants. Hardy told officers he didn't know how the cocaine had ended up in his car, claiming a friend had given him the bag at a party the night before, that his wallet had been passed around the room while he covered everyone's tab. He was booked on a charge of possession of a controlled substance and released on $5,000 bond. 6 weeks later, a grand jury indicted him on a single felony count of cocaine possession, exposing him to up to 2 years in prison and a $10,000 fine under Texas law. The case was eventually resolved through a plea deal that reduced the felony to a misdemeanor, requiring Hardy to complete community service, stay out of further trouble, and pay a $500 fine. It was far from his only off-field controversy. The cocaine arrest came roughly a year and a half after the NFL suspended Hardy 10 games, later reduced to 4 on appeal, following a domestic violence conviction in North Carolina that was ultimately dismissed after his accuser declined to cooperate with prosecutors. For NFL franchises, evaluating a player like Hardy meant constantly balancing raw, undeniable production against mounting reputational risk. At some point, off-field concerns become impossible to separate from on-field value. And for Hardy, that point arrived well before the cocaine charge. No teams signed him again. His case became one frequently cited in broader discussions about whether elite athletic performance should outweigh a pattern of repeated controversies. Next, Michael Irvin. By March of 1996, Michael Irvin was untouchable. The Dallas Cowboys had just won their 3rd Super Bowl in 4 seasons. Irvin, Troy Aikman, and Emmitt Smith, the triplets, were the most feared trio in football, and Irvin himself was on his way to a Hall of Fame career as one of the most dominant wide receivers the league had ever produced. He also had a tradition. After every Super Bowl run, Irvin gave himself roughly a month to, in his own words, cut loose before the next season began. That tradition caught up with him on the night of March 4th, 1996, just one day before his 31st birthday. Police arrived at a residence inn in Irving, Texas, responding to a noise complaint from hotel staff. Inside room 624, they found Irvin, former Cowboys tight end Alfredo Roberts, and 2 women. What they also found became one of the most infamous police reports in NFL history. Roughly 2 ounces of cocaine, 3 ounces of marijuana, drug paraphernalia, and sex toys scattered around the room. According to police, one of the bags contained, in the words of the officers on scene, the largest single chunk of crack cocaine they had ever personally encountered. Irvin was indicted on 2 felony counts of drug possession. He was facing up to 20 years in prison. The case became a circus. Accusations flew that the search itself may have been improperly conducted, that the hotel manager had lied about the noise complaint, that there may have even been a plot against Irvin connected to a Dallas police officer who was later convicted in an unrelated murder-for-hire scheme. The pretrial hearings dragged on for months. In the end, Irvin pleaded no contest to felony cocaine possession. He avoided prison entirely, receiving 4 years of deferred probation and a $10,000 fine, while a separate misdemeanor marijuana possession charge was dismissed as part of the agreement. NFL Commissioner Paul Tagliabue suspended him for the first 5 games of the 1996 season. The Cowboys, defending Super Bowl champions, opened at year 2 and 3. Irvin has since said publicly that he was never quite the same player after that season, and the Cowboys never returned to a conference championship game with that core trio intact. Decades later, on the Cowboys' own Netflix documentary, Irvin sat down and revisited the moment, including the conversation he had with his wife the night the indictment came down. One he has called the hardest conversation of his life. It's a rare case where the player himself has spent years publicly processing what happened, using it, by his own description, as a lesson in accountability for his children rather than something to hide from. Irvin's case set a template the league would see again and again. A superstar at the absolute peak of his career, one bad night, and a legal mess that outlives the headlines for decades. Next, Nate Newton. If Michael Irvin's story is about a single catastrophic night, Nate Newton's story is about a deliberate second career. Newton was, by any measure, one of the great offensive linemen of his era, a 6-time Pro Bowler who helped anchor the same Cowboys dynasty Irvin played in, protecting the quarterback and clearing the lanes for Emmitt Smith's record-setting runs. He retired after the 2000 season as a champion and a respected veteran. What came next stunned even people who thought they knew him. In November of 2001, Newton and 2 women were pulled over for a traffic violation on Interstate 10 in Louisiana. Inside their van, police found 213 pounds of marijuana. According to Newton's own later admissions, he and his associates were transporting it with the intention to sell it. And it got stranger. While out on bond just 6 weeks later, Newton was arrested again, this time with another 175 pounds of marijuana found in his vehicle. 2 arrests in the span of weeks for hundreds of pounds of drugs combined. Newton eventually pleaded guilty to the charges and was sentenced to 30 months in federal prison. He served roughly 2.5 years before his release. In interviews afterward, Newton didn't dress up his motivations with excuses about addiction or financial desperation in the way some other cases would. He attributed it, bluntly, to the same competitive drive that had made him a champion on the field. "I've always been competitive," he said. "I couldn't see myself not being the biggest dope man." He estimated he stood to make up to $75,000 per deal. It's one of the more unsettling explanations you'll hear in this entire list. Not desperation, not addiction, but a Hall of Fame caliber competitive drive redirected into criminal enterprise. Newton has since spoken about finding religious faith during his incarceration, describing a moment on his knees in his cell where he says he tried to make peace with his situation. In February of 2026, nearly a quarter century after his arrest, Nate Newton was one of the 5 former NFL players granted a full presidential pardon for his federal drug conviction. A pardon forgives the federal offense and restores certain civil rights, but it doesn't erase the historical record. Nate Newton will always be a 6-time Pro Bowler. He will also always be the lineman who got caught twice in 6 weeks with a van full of marijuana. Next, Josh Gordon. No player on this list illustrates the gap between talent and self-destruction quite like Josh Gordon. And his story looks different from most of the others on this list, because most of his consequences came not from the criminal justice system, but from the NFL's own substance abuse policy applied again and again and again. In 2013, his first full season, Gordon led the entire NFL in receiving yards and earned first-team All-Pro and Pro Bowl honors as a member of the Cleveland Browns. He was, by every statistical measure, one of the most talented receivers of his generation. By his own later admission to GQ magazine, he had been using marijuana, Xanax, and codeine to self-medicate anxiety since middle school, a detail that reframes much of what followed not simply as recklessness, but his untreated addiction playing out under a national spotlight. The suspension started piling up almost immediately. A 2-game suspension for performance-enhancing substances in 2013. a full season suspension in 2014 for violating the substance abuse policy, later reduced to 10 games on appeal, an indefinite suspension in February 2015. He also picked up a DWI arrest in July 2014 in Raleigh, North Carolina, separate from the policy violations themselves. By the time the Browns finally traded him to the New England Patriots in 2018, Gordon had missed 43 of Cleveland's previous 48 games, almost his entire prime gone. The cycle didn't stop in New England. In December 2018, Gordon announced he was stepping away from football to focus on his mental health, just as the league was preparing yet another indefinite suspension. He won a Super Bowl ring with the Patriots that season despite not playing in the game. He bounced to Seattle, was conditionally reinstated, broke the terms of that reinstatement, was reinstated again, broke it again, landing his sixth suspension in January 2021, the most of any player in modern NFL history for substance-related violations. Gordon's case sits in an interesting space relative to everyone else in this documentary. He was rarely in handcuffs. He was almost constantly in violation. And by the time the NFL dramatically softened its marijuana policy in the 2020 collective bargaining agreement, eliminating suspensions for positive marijuana tests entirely, it was too late to change the outcome of his career. The rules that might have let Josh Gordon simply pay a fine and keep playing arrived years after the same substance had already cost him the better part of a decade. Next, Reche Caldwell. Reche Caldwell enjoyed several productive NFL seasons, catching 61 passes for the Patriots in 2006, thrown to him by Tom Brady, after stints with the San Diego Chargers and a later run with the Washington Redskins. By the numbers, it was a solid six-season career for a second-round pick out of Florida. What came after football turned into one of the more startling, unraveling stories in this entire list. In early 2014, police raided an illegal gambling operation Caldwell had been running out of a building in West Tampa, one that was reportedly taking in close to $225,000 in bets each month and drawing more than 40 cars to the property on a typical football weekend. He posted bond. While the gambling case was still pending, Caldwell, by his own later account, restless, unemployed, and uncertain what to do with the money and free time his NFL career had left him, became interested in the recreational drug MDMA and decided to order a large quantity online from overseas, apparently believing he could turn a substantial profit reselling it. He had it shipped directly to his home in Tampa. The package was flagged by a suspicious postal worker. When Caldwell went to claim it, federal agents were waiting, and he was arrested and charged with possession of a controlled substance with intent to distribute, a third-degree felony in Florida, after signing for a parcel containing approximately 4.8 pounds of MDMA with an estimated street value north of $60,000. It marked the second time that year Caldwell had been arrested, following two separate marijuana-related traffic stops that summer and the gambling charges from earlier in the year. Caldwell ultimately pleaded guilty to a federal charge of conspiracy to distribute the substance, which carried a maximum sentence of 20 years and $1 million fine. His defense successfully argued that the chemical compound he'd actually ordered was a less potent variant than pure MDMA, helping him secure a far more lenient outcome. 27 months in federal prison and 3 years of probation, served at a minimum security camp in Montgomery, Alabama. The separate gambling charges were eventually resolved with time served. Caldwell's case highlighted a pattern that echoes throughout this list. Athletes may appear financially secure from the outside, yet poor decisions, sometimes born out of boredom, sometimes desperation, can create legal consequences that threaten both reputation and long-term stability. His attorney later put it bluntly. Caldwell had been, in his words, ill-equipped to handle life outside the NFL. Tragically, Caldwell's story didn't end with his release from prison. In June 2020, at 41 years old, Reche Caldwell was shot and killed during an apparent robbery attempt outside his home in Tampa. By all accounts from family and friends, he'd spent his final years working to put his earlier troubles behind him. It's a sobering reminder that for some of the men in this story, the consequences of a difficult chapter in life don't always get the chance to be the final word, and that the broader struggles many former players face after football don't always resolve themselves on a predictable timeline. Next, Eugene "Mercury" Morris. Eugene "Mercury" Morris was one of the most electrifying running backs of the early 1970s. The Miami Dolphins selected him in the third round of the 1969 AFL-NFL draft out of West Texas State. He was fast, not just fast for a running back, but fast for any human being on a football field. His nickname wasn't given by accident. He became a key part of the legendary Miami Dolphins backfield alongside Larry Kasonka and Jim Keek, one of the greatest rushing trios in NFL history. And in 1972, Mercury Morris was part of something that has never happened before or since in professional football. The Miami Dolphins went 17-0. A perfect season. They won the Super Bowl without a single loss on their record. Mercury Morris was a champion, a Super Bowl champion. He ran for over 1,000 yards in that undefeated season. He was one of the best players in the entire league. He won another Super Bowl the following year. He was supposed to be set for life. The transition out of football was brutal. The identity that had defined him since childhood, the speed, the field, the roar of the crowd, disappeared overnight. The structure vanished. The paycheck stopped. And the NFL offered almost nothing in terms of support for the men it had just finished using. In 1982, Mercury Morris was arrested on cocaine trafficking charges. He was convicted. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison. A two-time Super Bowl champion, sent to prison for 20 years. He served 3.5 years before his conviction was overturned on appeal. Mercury Morris lived. He has spoken publicly for decades about what the fall from NFL glory looks like when there is no safety net. When the league takes everything you have and gives nothing back. When the only identity you've ever had is the one that ends the day you hang up your cleats. His story is a tragedy, not because of death, but because of what the sport did to his life after the final whistle. 2 Super Bowl rings. 3.5 years in a prison cell. The NFL celebrated what he built, then watched him fall without lifting a finger. Next, Jamal Lewis. Jamal Lewis wasn't just another running back. Selected 5th overall by the Baltimore Ravens in the 2000 draft, Lewis won a Super Bowl ring as a rookie and became one of the most dominant rushers of his era. In 2003, he became just the 5th player in NFL history to surpass 2,000 rushing yards in a single season, a feat that earned him NFL Offensive Player of the Year honors and still ranks among the greatest single seasons by a running back in league history. Then came federal legal trouble connected to a cocaine investigation, one that traced back, strangely, to almost the very beginning of his career. According to prosecutors, just months after Baltimore drafted him in 2000, a 20-year-old Lewis used his cell phone to help a childhood friend arrange a cocaine deal with a government informant in Atlanta. No drugs ever actually changed hands. But the FBI had been listening, and more than 4 years later, in 2004, the case finally caught up with him, by then a Pro Bowl running back at the height of his career. Lewis was charged with conspiracy to possess with intent to distribute 5 kilograms of cocaine, a count that could have carried at least 10 years in federal prison if he'd gone to trial and lost. Instead, he reached a plea agreement with prosecutors, pleading guilty to the lesser charge of using his cell phone to facilitate a drug deal, with the more serious conspiracy and attempted possession charges dropped. In January 2005, a federal judge sentenced him to 4 months in prison at a federal camp at Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama, plus 2 additional months in a halfway house, 500 hours of community service, a $20,000 fine, and a year of probation with random drug testing. The judge specifically noted the government's case had been built on the testimony of an informant with a lengthy criminal record of his own, a factor in the relatively light sentence. The NFL separately suspended him for 2 games. I made a mistake 4 years ago, when I was 20 years old, that I'm paying heavily for, Lewis told reporters outside the courthouse after entering his plea. His comeback surprised many observers. Rather than disappearing from the league entirely, Lewis was released from prison in time to attend the Ravens' off-season program, returned to the field for the 2005 season, and went on to play 3 additional seasons with the Cleveland Browns, adding thousands more rushing yards to a resume that already included one of the greatest single seasons in NFL history. That doesn't erase the seriousness of the original offense, but it does show that careers can sometimes recover after significant legal setbacks when players accept the consequences and continue forward. And like several other men in this story, Lewis's case received a final, unexpected coda decades later. In February 2026, President Trump granted Lewis a full presidential pardon for his federal drug conviction, one of 5 former NFL players. A pardon forgives the federal offense and restores certain civil rights. It doesn't erase the historical record or the 4 months Lewis spent away from his team at the height of his career, but it closed the book more than 20 years later on a case that began with a phone call he made as a 20-year-old rookie. The NFL celebrates extraordinary discipline on the field, yet some of its biggest stars have faced equally extraordinary failures away from it. One misconception among fans is that wealth automatically protects athletes from accountability. Reality often proves otherwise. These incidents remind us that talent does not make anyone immune from the law or from the consequences of personal choices. Every story is different. Every circumstance is unique. But together, they reveal an uncomfortable truth. One moment of poor judgment can threaten years of hard-earned success. For aspiring athletes watching from home, perhaps that's the biggest lesson of all. Making it to the NFL is incredibly difficult. Staying there and protecting everything you've built can be even harder. If these stories surprised you, there are more buried in old court records and forgotten headlines. Subscribe if you want us to keep digging them up. And let us know in the comments, which case on this list shocked you the most?